Thank you so much, Catherine and Leah. I'd like to just take a few moments to briefly introduce the work of the Center of Excellence for Immigrant Child Health and Wellbeing at UCSF Benioff Children's Hospitals. The idea of the center began in 2019 with conversations between two of our pediatricians and a social worker in response to the anti-immigration policies of that current presidential administration. And with the support of hospital leadership, we established the center in January 2020. And as a cross-Bay center, cross-Bay entity, our mission is to establish an inclusive community that provides leadership and guidance towards the promotion of optimal health and well-being of immigrant children. The work of the center sits on three pillars: education, advocacy, and clinical services. In 2021, we launched a pediatric asylum clinic where we provide medical and psychological forensic exams to support children and youth petitioning for asylum. In addition, we're also training the next generation of providers with an immigrant-focused health curriculum. The center is invested in the mental health and wellness of immigrant children, youth, and families, and we are grateful to be partnering with First 5 Alameda to offer this event. It's my pleasure to introduce to you today Dr. Vilma Reyes. Vilma Reyes is an associate clinical professor and director of training at the University of California, San Francisco in the Child Trauma Research Program. Since 2009, she has been providing child-parent psychotherapy services, training, clinical supervision, consultation, and coordinating community-based mental health outreach services and evaluation. Welcome, Dr. Reyes.
Gracias, Aura. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And thank you to First 5 Alameda for inviting me and the center. Along with what Aura said, I am an immigrant myself. My family came here from Peru when I was 12 years old, seeking asylum. And we experienced firsthand the failures of so many organized systems, school system, immigration system, social services. And those experiences as an immigrant myself really fueled my passion for bringing back to the community. The courage I witnessed in my parents in coming here with 4 children to save their lives, our lives, and to give us a future fuels my passion and commitment to this field and this community, as I imagine many of you as well. And I thank you for your work and your commitment to this community. I bring to you today everything I've been able to get my hands on in terms of what's been written on trauma and its impact on communities, and what have been the agents of healing that I have learned about, not only from all the books and education, but wonderful mentors that I've been so fortunate to learn from. And just as importantly, or even more importantly, I bring to you the collective wisdom of 20 years of listening carefully and generously to immigrant families with young children. 20 years of witnessing their struggle, their courage, their hope, what brought them here, what kept them here, what keeps them waking up in the morning, working to the bone for their children, their families. And I bring to you what I have learned in my journey here about wounding, about healing, the intersection of that with immigration. I come from a legacy of attachment theory and relational intervention. So you will see that thread in my talk for today. It's really backed up by neuroscience. We are wired to connect. We wound, we heal in the context of relationships, and you will see that thread. And I'm hoping to also compile together the collective wisdom from everything I've learned on what helps people move forward, and all the things that you can do in all the roles that are represented here today to advocate for families, to accompany their journey and of healing, and to help them connect with each other. I want to start by saying that learning what to do with the emotional impact of this work especially if you have your own life experiences that brought you here, is the most essential and most difficult component of this work. You can learn everything you want about theory, but keeping your heart open and connected is maybe the most important gift you can give to anyone that is seeking your support. And sometimes the hardest thing to sustain over the years. You need your heart for this work. This is hard work. And I invite you today to notice what is happening in your body as you're hearing me talk, to take care of yourself, to take care of each other, and to continue learning what to do with this, the feelings that come up, to learn to metabolize, to flow, to connect, to stay present as much as you can. And when you need to take a break, notice what's happening in your body, help it settle. We lean into the fire, to pain and suffering when most others maybe run away from it. And as a result of that, that will have an impact on your heart. It should. I don't know about you, but I'm not willing to lose my humanity over this work. You will feel some things. And I invite you to over time, learn yourself, learn about yourself, continue learning about what helps you sustain connected to your body, to yourself, to your emotional reaction, and to each other. Caring for yourself and your community and community care is so essential in sustaining this work. So I wanted to start out with that. The story of immigration is a story as old as we've been humans. The will, the espíritu de lucha, the indomitable spirit and courage that people show is remarkable. And the people you're working with, and many people here today, come from a long line of survivors and have learned wisdom about what it takes to survive and what it takes to risk this very dangerous journey. Often, not just for yourselves, but often what drives it is for their children and for the love of their children. So I wanted to start by just honoring the universality of this experience, how long it has been part of the human experience, and what we have learned from it over time. When we think about trauma, for a long time, most of the talks that I had heard about trauma and the writing that has been written on trauma focused on particular interpersonal events. Particular events, when you think of trauma, most of you might be thinking of events of abuse or neglect or an accident, a particular event. And certainly those are mark and create an enormous impact on people and families and communities. And in my 20 years of hearing people's stories of what has wounded them and their families, and what's become ruptures relationally and ruptures in their social contract of feeling safe, fundamentally safe in the world. In all of those stories, most of what I hear is this outer layer. Most of the wounding has either been caused or exacerbated by the outer layer that for a long time in the field of trauma were the unspeakables. We're not part of trauma screeners. We're not asked about. They're the everyday insults to your sense of self as a person, your worthiness as a person, the everyday messages that we are bombarded by every day from society of our worth based on the color of our skin, our social location, our access to power, to funds, to money, to safety. We've come a long way in acknowledging that more and more, this collective trauma. And it's so important for all of you in all the fields that are represented here today, that we speak those speakables, that we acknowledge them, that we name them, that we recognize what people have been up against. And in their journey of bouncing back and buffering and survival, a lot of what the obstacles that get in the way especially for immigrant families and so many other communities that are marginalized, is this outer layer. To link this same with the original ACEs study, sadly didn't include those kind of more toxic elements of the soil that have been passed on over generations of people's will to survive at the expense of so much. The echoes, the very loud echoes of genocide and slavery, mass incarceration, Holocaust, forced displacement, all of these things that are in the water, in the soil that has bred about all of the things we ask about in the ACEs study. So I encourage us today, when we're thinking about trauma, I don't just mean the interpersonal particular events we often ask about in screeners and assessment. I'm also thinking about what Dr. Kenneth Hardy refers to as this assaulted sense of self, these small, seemingly small, but small drops that over time cause a wear and tear on our health, on the longevity of our life, on the quality of our life. Resmaa Menakem refers to it as soul wounds, this constant wear and tear. I know it's painful to think about, but I want us to hold this in mind as we think about the impact, not only of the immigrant experience, the often horrific journey, horrific trauma that they're fleeing from, horrific journey to get here, but then also this broader injustice that continues to play out once they arrive. Because often the image that one has that drives you through those 1,500 miles, this image of thriving, of success, of health, is often not matched by the injustice economically, in housing, in health, that they're faced with. And so this is an inescapable context that sadly not only impacts individuals, but impacts the parent-child relationship and the relationship between family members, which will be my focus today. Again, in trying to summarize for you all the years of graduate training and experience working with people, if I were to put together what trauma does to people, to systems, to our sense of self, I can sum all of it almost in that it overwhelms the system that gives us the capacity for sense of control, connection, and meaning. And time again, I keep coming back to these three words. I find them very helpful organizing way to think about the impact of the insult of trauma. And also it guides us into being truly trauma-informed systems. If we are working towards giving people back opportunities for sense of control, connection, and meaning. And almost all of the symptoms we classify in the DSM, and almost all of the reasons why people are referred to people like me for, or that you might see in classrooms, home visits, and all the context in which you work with immigrant families. Almost all of those manifestations of pain can be categorized as ways that people have been robbed of a sense of control. Trauma, by definition, robs you of a sense of predictability and control. The saddest way that it affects people is this sense of connection. This social contract that you are worthy and protected is broken. And the sense of meaning. How do we make meaning of such unjust things that happen, such horrific unjust things that happen to people? Almost all the kid in the Head Start classroom throwing a chair at its teacher, or the adolescent cutting, or the parent in such distress and depression and anxiety, almost all are manifestations of losing those sense of connection, sense of control, sense of trust and meaning. And if you think about intervention across all levels, not just in mental health, but in social services and in policy, program development, all the ways that brought you here today, hold it up against these three words. Am I giving people back what they deserve in terms of a sense of control? Is the community driving the intervention? Is their voice and choice being centered in the intervention? Are we giving people back a sense of trust with connection? The relationship you build with people is the central, most important thing you can create. You are creating a different working template or conclusion about what relationships can feel like. And it's not just what you provide. You need to fostering a healing and a regained sense of connection with each other. Community work and organizing work is so essential. This is backed up, by the way, by so many studies that confirm the most healing agent of therapy is the therapeutic relationship. And so many studies that show that groups and organizations that bring the community back, for them to get the answers to their own questions and find them with each other. I met Auda in a place called the Good Samaritan, and I'll never forget what I learned there. They've been working with immigrant families for decades. And this is very early in my career. And I learned that the very things that the immigrant community needed, which were connections for employment and housing, our social services weren't equipped to help them getting that when they were undocumented. That the ways that they got both of the solutions to those problems were each other. We're partnering to start new businesses. We're renting rooms. And so what they did is they had an open community hour, provided food, opened their doors, and invited the community in. That is so powerful in so many levels, on a concrete level, but also in sense of well-being. You're giving that back to the community. And then lastly, meaning, which is a lot of the work that I do, is helping parents be able to guide their children into creating a sense of meaning for the things that have happened to them. This isn't just me being corny. I promise I have a lot of neuroscience to back it up. We are social beings. We are wired for connection. Despite being harmed, our drive, our momentum to want to trust, to want to heal is enormous. Trauma, sadly, rewires our brain for protection. From all the species, we come to the world the most immature, the most vulnerable, and require adults for the longest time to survive. Our brain come ready for inputs. Our brains come and are very mature, and it is experiences that shape our brain. Experiences will shape the neural connections, the number and the strength of the connections in our brain, the structure of our brain, all to prepare us for survival. We are driven to survive at all costs. And if the world that we know it is a world of fear, our brain is so brilliant in that it shapes accordingly to help us stay alive. Sadly, it comes to a tremendous cost. The child who has learned and who their brain has been shaped to be looking out for danger, waiting for the other shoe to drop, or who will be a source of harm, does not have a lot of bandwidth left in their brain to learn, which requires a sense of security and to be able to imagine and create and learn and all those things. So how do children show us that they've been impacted by trauma? You will see this across the age range. My main expertise is in early childhood. Many of the things that young children show us of what is often the behavior that becomes most disruptive, that kids end up getting referred to people like me for. I encourage all of us to really see past that behavior, which is just the tip of the iceberg. Most of this behavior is, all of it is communication of how they have learned to survive. And a lot of those, what we call symptoms, but really manifestations of wanting some help and wanting connection from adults, our stress responses are either a fight or flight or freeze responses. Many of the things we see, the child throwing the chair, are ways that they've had to learn to get big, to protect themselves, because they've lost hope or trust that adults will be able to do that for them. The kid hiding under the table or chair in the classroom, the kids that are withdrawn and sadly, don't get referred to people like me for. They're not as disruptive and often fall through the cracks. I invite you, I encourage you, I plead you to be the eyes and ears for those kids. If there is a child not playing, That is just as concerning if they're isolated, they're not engaging with other people, adults or children. That is just as concerning. Or a freeze response, which also fall through the cracks, which are the kids that feel numb. Another thing I want to add here is that we've learned, and it gets confirmed time over time, that young children need their parents, need their caregivers, need adults' help in understanding and making meaning of the things that they have seen, heard, felt. There is such a strong pull to believe that young children don't understand, don't remember, don't see, are sleeping. And sadly, when they don't have the adults' help to understand the things that have happened in their life, and they're left on their own with it, and they get that message that they're not supposed to feel, that's what children tend to do, is that they tend to assume it must have been something they've done. Children tend to blame themselves for the things that have happened, especially when they don't have an adult's help to understand it. All of us have these typical normative universal fears that we across development try to a certain extent master, although you could argue that these are fears that are always with us still into adulthood, but they peak at certain points of development. The fear of separation, for example, which is the most common of these, which peaks from 8 to 24 months, makes a lot of sense for survival, right? This is a time where you're more mobile, you're wanting to explore, you're able to crawl, you're able to walk. This fear keeps you close to your protector, to your secure base, to your caregiver, to your parent. This fear of separation is often, if it has not been compounded by reality, if it has not been compounded by trauma, gets to a certain extent mastered, right? Children over time learn, parents leave, but they come back. And over time, they can develop a sense of security, and this fear is not as strong. When traumatic experiences confirm what we are most profoundly afraid of, especially in these peak developmental stages, it becomes more than a fear, it becomes a conviction. I say this to you because as you're thinking about the impact of trauma on a family, hold in mind what happened, when did it happen, what was already happening to them developmentally, how was that developmental trajectory set awry because of the experience. And all of this, I know this first part is a little heavy because we're sitting with the impact, but all of this informs our interventions. Because if we know where the wounding has happened, we can be better equipped to know where to repair it. And if the wounding has been in separation, which is almost always the case with immigration, then that's where our interventions need to be as well. How does one generation teach the next what it needs to do to survive? That is our biggest and strongest pull as parents, is to keep our children alive. When the world as we know it has been frightening, that will of course impact the parenting that we feel we need to give to prepare our children for that type of world. So along this legacy of survival, there is the beautiful assets of cultural wealth. That legacy of wisdom, of love, of lucha that is passed on. And then there's also a legacy, what can become of an intergenerational transmission of trauma. What sadly over time people think is culture, but it's not really culture. It's historical trauma. It's fear that gets passed on because we want to protect our children. And we might be passing on the pain that's been passed on to us. So thinking across generations, and where is your port of entry, your opportunity for interrupting intergenerational transmission of trauma, of things that parents don't want to keep passing on to their kids. And how can you lift up generational wealth, cultural wealth of what they do know? And for many parents, by the time I meet them, they feel so defeated and have forgotten, or it has never been acknowledged, what warriors they are, what fighters they are, what they do know, what they've been able to accomplish. It is so essential that in your work with immigrant families, this gets lifted up. maybe sometimes for the first time. What did it take to get here? Use that. Back to this thread of attachment. Young children know that their survival depends on their caregiver's survival. They are intricately connected with that caregiver. In fact, their sense of self and individuation doesn't come until later in the first stages of life. We and the people and their caregiver, our primary caregiver, are one. This attachment system is what organizes and modulates our stress response system. Everything that we do, all aspects of development and learning, emotionally, cognitively, all of it happens and is organized around our primary relationships and this attachment system. So we can't be thinking about strategies per se on helping people modulate affect and recover from stress and trauma without looking at relationships that are the very organizing factors of how we are built, how we are wired, how we respond. So as we're thinking of what a young child needs from their caregiver in these early stages to be able to create a sense of security in the world, a sense of healthy sense of self and worthiness, how is that sense of security in the world shattered when their caregivers are frightened? When their caregivers are targeted, are disrespected, when they have a panic attack, when the police is behind them, when, as I have seen happen many times, when there's been raids in the community, when young children are hearing their parents say that they are afraid to go to the grocery store and that they need to hide out. They're afraid to send their child to school because they have been heard that there were immigration aids and raids. I see as people who can foster repair and healing in this primary relationship by both helping the child be able to restore a sense of confidence and trust in the protective shield of the parent, and by helping that parent be able to recognize where they were able to be a protective shield and have your support and concrete assistance to be able to reclaim, to remember what they do have and take up that protective shield and be and rediscover a sense of confidence, or sometimes discover for the first time a sense of confidence in their role as a parent. As my colleague Monica Noriega says, this relationship, the parent-child relationship, is the heart of the revolution. There is no revolution without relationship. And what we need today, as we've needed for a very long time, is a revolution, is change, is justice. This is where you can really target so many generations at once. So much of the story of immigration has been disrupted by the wounds of separation and the wounds of parents and children being separated, and I invite you to think about opportunities of repair here. Let's transition a little bit now to thinking about the immigration experience. The immigrant community is wide and very diverse. 1 in 5 people in the US is a first or second generation immigrant. And the generation coming, even more so, 1/4 of children under 18 have an immigrant parent. We are the face, as we've always been, of this land. People come here from all roads and different contexts and situations. My primary emphasis today and expertise are asylum seekers, primarily from Central America and Mexico. But that's not, and that might be the case for some or most of you, given our region and where we're located. But I don't want to lose sight of this broader and bigger community of immigrants. Immigrants are 1/4 of physicians. They drive and have always driven innovation and research in this country. What prompts immigration? The main 3 factors are family reunification, a search for work, or humanitarian refuge. Again, my focus has mostly been humanitarian refuge and asylum seekers that are fleeing war, violence, environmental catastrophe. Again, my emphasis has been more in the area of the Northern Triangle. It's important for us to hold history in mind of this area. When you're meeting a parent that is the daughter of or son of or has lived through themselves of a very cruel, long-standing civil war in El Salvador that has impacted, again, across generations, the genocide of the Maya community in Guatemala. And sadly, US interventions have helped destabilize this region. And that's important for us to hold in mind and be real with, because of what we might represent as systems when we meet people. Many are fleeing gang violence. There isn't a sense of accountability. Most crimes go unpunished. Sadly, there's a lot of corruption. Unaccompanied minors are the majority fleeing violence from organized gangs or trying to escape gangs or avoid kidnappings or have had threats of kidnappings or sexual assault. In Haiti, the contexts are devastating, long-standing natural disasters and political instability. Thousands have been deported without a fair process of immigrants have come from Haiti in the last few years. Afghanistan as well, with a recent Taliban takeover, years of internal conflict. 2,000 refugees were resettled in the US and millions around the world. So there's a bigger context here of who is the immigrant community. And I think we need to be real too with the multiple identities that immigrants hold and the areas of marginalization within those identities and the disparities on how the US government has responded differently to different pleas around the world. Breaks my heart to see the images on the left, as you have likely seen in the media, of Haitian asylum-seeking immigrants that were lassoed as they entered the country. The thousands of families that after 1,500 miles of a horrific journey experienced the worst, as many families have told me, the worst traumas when they were here, forced to separate from their young children, tear gassed at the border. This is in April. And then in May, we saw a very different story with immigrants coming from Ukraine. And I, as maybe many of you, felt a little confused, not confused, it sadly confirmed for me the anti-Blackness and the racism that is part of our immigrant policy. And I loved how people came together around Ukraine. I loved the flags around my neighborhood, children being welcomed in schools. And I wondered, where was that compassion for our people? Where was that compassion for Black and Brown immigrants? I realize that this might be a controversial slide and it's provocative. And honestly, I hesitated on sharing it. And then I decided this is about speaking the unspeakable and being real. And I support our policies around Ukraine, but what I'm putting out there is, can we be that way around all immigrants who are exercising their human right, their international human right to seek asylum through ports of entry in the country? Sadly, for those immigrants, immigration has been criminalized. COVID didn't help matters much with Title 42, which hopefully will be coming to an end in May of this year. But it armed our government to be able to And they were very frank in that they were using these tactics to deter further immigration. The legislation of Remain in Mexico has created overcrowding in camps across the border with tremendous vulnerability to natural disasters, to weather, to hunger, without much social services or policies. There's been an increase in Mexican military personnel in migrant routes that has led to more apprehension and deportation back to countries of origin. There's been more deaths in the border than we had seen in the past. So sadly, the situation is in many, it's a crisis. Forced separation, as we have seen in such horrific, torturous way in the past few years, sadly, it's not the only time that separation has happened. Separation has always been part of the story, the immigrant story, whether it's temporary separations as families cross the border, families divided due to forced exile. And again, I talked about attachment so much because I want us to think about the impact of this separation. For those of you who are doing evaluations for children that were separated, I think it's important for us to know common phases that children go through when they're separated from their caregivers and when they're reunited. Sadly, when people do evaluations, if they see a child that seems to not be showing in the way that you can understand that they're in distress, that might be misinterpreted as them have settled in their new environment or not be thinking about or not be remembering what they've left behind, and that's not true. Children actually fare the best when they're reunited as soon as possible. Children who are separated, the longer, research shows that the longer they're separated, the worse the outcomes over time. There is this sense of fear without resolution. They may treat their parents as strangers, as we've seen, and I chose not to show you a really very sad video of a mother being reunited with her son after being forced to separate at the border, where the child was walking away from her. And she tells her partner, "Está traumado, my son is traumatized." So I encourage you to be keen observers of the impact of separation and reunification and the impact of this separation on children and parents. And again, all of this to hopefully inform what we can do to help restore these connections. We designed a group for families that had been separated at the border, and not necessarily at the border, families that have been separated due to immigration. It's called Lazos Familiares. It's a multi-family group that we did in San Rafael, where the complete family, whoever is here together now, is invited. And it was 7 weeks. We provided dinner. Families were together for part of the intervention. For other parts, we had the youth together in a separate room, the young kids together with some developmentally appropriate activities for them. The parents had a space of their own, and then they would come together. I am so humbled by what I learned from those families that continue to confirm for me that really this is where it's at. This is the heart of the work in immigration, is repairing these wounds. We saw so many youth that were so hurt, so upset, so betrayed by their parents. They had the sense of abandonment. Why did you leave me? Many of them were separated for years, and you saw the pain in the parents who were forced to make this decision nobody should have to make, and decided to come earlier to be able to bring them back, to be able to send them money. And the little 2, 3, 4-year-old that they left is now a sullen teenager that is not giving them the open-armed welcome that they had imagined, that is hurt, that is upset, while the parent worked so hard to be able to bring them here and miss them every day. We were able to have those conversations. We used this book from my colleague, Chandra Ghoshaipan. She has a lot of other great resources for kids that have been exposed to trauma. I recommend you looking it up. And we used this book, and we had families make their own books. This is a mom who was helping writing what her kid said, her kid saying, estaba triste, estaba bravo y enojada. Me estaba doliendo el estómago porque te extrañé. The English is there on the slide, but to me, it just feels more impactful in the way it was written. This and other interventions, which, by the way, we are recruiting families to do this intervention again. My colleagues at Canal Alliance are recruiting, and if you are local, invite you to use that resource. But there are many other similar interventions that are focusing on these types of wounds that immigration causes and ways to recover from them. I want to take just a minute to ask you something, because there's so much expertise in this room. What do you know about, and not just from your career, but your life experience, your abuelitas, your what's been bestowed upon you and what you've been able to learn in your career and what you've learned from families about what heals? What heals a broken heart? And just use the chat and say a couple words. What are the main agents of change, the main mechanisms of change? Love, connection, prayer, acceptance, listening, empathy, understanding, faith, time, speaking on it. Food, that reminds me of home. Community, basic needs being met. Music, confidence, art, dance, being seen and heard. Lovely, this is so lovely, so powerful. Communication, community, being truthful, reassurance, celebration, laughter. This is beautiful. You know what heals, right? You don't, and families know what heals. Ask them this. What do they know that heals? And whenever I get asked to do these talks, maybe surprisingly, people ask me strategies. We need strategies. We need strategies. And yet the research and the wisdom of my peers says that what people need are the things you listed. And strategies, I think, are mostly helpful in a way for us to feel like we have some sense of agency and control in an insurmountable pain that we are witnessing and that we're accompanying people healing with. Those strategies are helpful, and I promise I will give you a few. I will give you some. And I want to recognize there's more to this very human type of work that you have chosen, that you've been drawn to. Many of those components you listed, families have within themselves. Some have forgotten and need to reclaim that. Our interventions need to match the things you listed. We need to match community-based interventions, groups, leadership within the community to give people back that confidence, to reclaim what they do know, their knowledge and wisdom of what they have been through, what they've learned, and what they need. Another thing I want to put out there as we go deeper on strategies, if we want to call them that, is I've always found this you might have heard this before, the immigrant paradox. There's research that shows that first-generation immigrants tend to have better health outcomes than members of the host culture. They come in with better health outcomes than people who are already here. And then these differences decrease over generations. That actually adopting American host culture and acculturation has been associated with negative effects and outcomes. It's a paradox, because people come here with hopes of a better life, and something that is a buffer is eroded. Immigrants are maybe a self-selected group of people that, by definition, something horrific happened, and you were self-selected as people that I know for sure had at least two things: courage and hope and optimism. You thought something was better on the other side, or a self-selected group that has those things. Those are incredible, powerful forces. They're coming in with a strength that is eroded over time. That is worth being curious about. There's different hypotheses on this, like acculturative stress. We could argue there are ways we can understand that data. I want us to think about what is eroded over time that is a buffer, that is cultural wealth. How can we foster that? How can we reclaim that? What are these protective factors? And it's back to the things you listed on the chat and the things that I hear from parents. Is there anything that a good sopa de pollo can heal? Is to use what they already have in terms of connection and what they know to build their confidence, that they know what helps their child. And we are partnering with them because we know some things too. I don't want to undermine all your training and all your experience. That is worthwhile. But I think when we come to the table, we need to see what they're bringing so that we can truly partner. This isn't to from, it's with. Who is standing before you? They're warriors. They are survivors. And it's not coming from nothing and then we're building up. Our starting point, the default is all this strength that we need to be more curious about. Most assessment forms have like a question on family strengths and a lot of other questions about symptoms. Tell them you need another paper. You're going to need more room to write with the strength. Let's be as curious about that as we are about pain and symptoms and that's legitimate too. People are coming to us because they're hurting and there's something there that's painful that we can partner with them to help heal. And they're not coming from nothing. What is stronger than the human heart, which shatters over and over and still lives? From Rupi Kaur. So what can you do? So now that we've covered what families are already bringing, let's think about what we can add, right? What do we bring into the table? I'm going to share some ideas of what I have found to help families, maybe in general, recover from trauma, but maybe we can think uniquely in the immigrant community. One is speaking the unspeakable, which I learned from my dear mentor, Alicia Lieberman. The next I'll talk about is reconnecting to affect and this sense of embodiment. Restoring safety in relationship to self and others, and system-based interventions, advocacy and policy, because as many of you notice, if we don't change what's the concrete obstacles in the immigration system and social services system and child welfare system, and then families are continuously being up against that broader context of collective harm. Let's start with the first one, speaking the unspeakable. You might have also heard name it to tame it. Young children are left alone with their experiences and questions and fears if they don't have a caregiver to help them understand it. In child-parent psychotherapy, we learned in detail about what's happened to young children's lives and what's happened in the parent's life. And we partner with parents for them to be the vehicle to restore the child's sense of security. I have gotten a lot of traction from this question. How would you like your child to understand what happened? Sometimes parents are telling me about really horrific things that have happened, and their young children are around, are present, and I have to pause them a little. Let's think about what they're hearing. Let's think about what they have experienced and might be remembering. Many parents say, they're so little, they don't understand. But children do understand. We have a robust body of literature in early childhood and trauma that confirms that actually young children are more vulnerable, not less, to the impact of trauma. The impact of trauma is a dynamic relationship between the insult at hand and your buffer, to be able to cognitively make sense of it, to be able to emotionally and your nervous system to be able to buffer from it, to be able to regulate your affect. What do you have at your disposal to buffer? In contrast to the insult, young children have very little buffer, if at all. Young children's buffer is their caregiver. They're dependent on their caregiver to be that buffer. So we need to be the eyes and ears for the young children and speaking the unspeakable and feeling the unfeelable. Can we name? Can we help young children understand what has happened? And can we partner with parents to help them understand? Do I have time for a story? I'm going to tell you a story. Little girl was referred to me for dysregulation. She was very, very upset whenever her mom left and dropped her off at daycare. Mom was very worried that these, what the center was calling tantrums or episodes that lasted for 30 minutes would be a cause for her to be expelled from that daycare. Teachers and the system and the director was getting so upset and frustrated and overwhelmed by this little girl's screams the first half hour of school. They referred them to me. Mom appeared so afraid, and at first didn't tell me the whole story. It really took some time for me to gain some trust and to explain to her that I wasn't part of the daycare, that I was, that she had privacy here with the exception that we give of confidentiality. And over time, and on the second session, as we were trying to understand what this little girl was telling us, she shared that her dad had been deported a couple of weeks ago. This little girl was 2, but going on 3, and a really verbal, very, very smart little girl. And as mom is telling me that dad was deported, I'm thinking about the impact of that on her little girl. And I said, how would you like her to understand? How does she understand what happened to daddy? Mom looked at me like, what are you talking about, lady? She's 2. She can't understand that. I just tell her he's at work. I just, she asks, she's papi. She looks out the window when he usually would be coming home from work. And I say, honey, he'll be back. He's at work. And I ask her, what do you think, what happens when you have to leave in the morning? And I say, please, I tell her I have to go to work. She was so desperate because if she lost the daycare, the spot at the daycare, if she lost, she would lose employment. And if she lost employment, she would lose housing. She now was the only person being able to support them financially. She had this very urgent need to go to work. And she would tell her in the morning, I have to go to work, honey, I have to go to work. And I asked Mom, do you think it's possible that when you go to, you're telling her you go to work, which is the same place where daddy went poof, do you think it's possible she's worried that you might go poof too? Daddy never came back and maybe you won't either. And she said, oh, I don't think so. She's so little. How would I even explain this to her? How, I doubt she's thinking all that. To her credit, she was willing to try something new. And I said, well, is it worth a try? Is it worth a try? How would you want her to understand it? How could we explain this to a 2-year-old going on 3? Mom and I came to an agreement she was good with, where we have a map in my office, and the family is from Mexico. We thought, well, let's show her a map and explain that there are rules and borders people made up and rules at each side of this border. And that people noticed daddy didn't have a particular paper. They didn't have a paper that he needed to be here. And he had to go back to get that paper, and that he didn't want to leave, and that he misses you and is working hard to come back. Mom amused me and said, I don't know about all this, but sure, let's try it. We invite the little girl in the first session. I introduce myself, and I say, your mommy has told me that it's so sad when she leaves in the morning. And she's also told me, and I invited Mom to tell her herself. She said, no, you tell her. And it's okay. She was there and she gave permission. And I said, your mommy told me this about daddy. And I shared everything that I had just said. The little girl looks at her mom and says, no mi culpa. It's not my fault. And the mom softened, her body softened. She teared up in a way I had never seen. And she embraced her little girl and said, claro que no, mija. Of course not. And hugged her and said, your daddy misses you so much and he wants to come back. Mom had later put together, and because I was at the daycare, I kept seeing her. And she said, I know why she thinks that. We got into an argument the last morning, before she was dropped off at school, and he was deported during the day while she was in daycare. And we had gotten into an argument about something minor, but about parenting. The little girl had thought that maybe daddy was mad at her, or that she made her parents argue and he left her. And like I said, because of cognitive development and developmentally, many kids at this age somehow will find a way to come back to thinking. It's also a way that we try to have some control over a situation, right? If I have caused it, I have some control over it. We try to organize our life that way. So young children likely are thinking that it was something bad that they did. Anyway, this intervention opened mom being able to FaceTime daddy and be honest that when she goes to work, that's a very different thing, that daddy is not just at work, that this is what happened, that mommy didn't know how to explain it to her, but she wanted her to know the truth. It restored confidence and trust in their relationship. And then the next morning, it was a very different routine. They had already tried so many things with extinguishing that behavior, with different distractions in the morning and ways to reinforce when she was okay or when she calmed down. But nobody had been asking, why is this little girl so afraid? Why is she crying? Behavior means something. It's not just something to extinguish or change. This changed everything for the next morning. The little girl understood that this was different. Weeks later, the mom comes back to me and said, can I talk to you for a minute? And she's like, I've really been thinking about being honest with my kid. I appreciate your help with this. And I want to be honest with you. I don't know if I'm coming back either. This is a few years ago when things were very tense, not that they're not now, but there were a lot of raids happening in San Francisco. And she said, I'm also undocumented. And what if I worry every day and I lose sleep at night worrying that I could be deported or picked up at work and I wouldn't be able to pick her up. And I said to her, that is the type of worry that we as adults can hold together and that you can come and tell me about. And that is the sad, heavy burden of parents, that we're up at night worrying about all these things. But she doesn't need to know that. And she doesn't. The kids need, I'm not saying they need to know all the details of everything that's happened. They need their parents' help in answering their questions and making it really clear that the things they have seen are okay to talk about. And they need our help as providers to translate, to help parents translate in developmentally appropriate language how to explain really complicated things to young kids. And that's where you come in. We all can serve a role in listening to parents, listening generously. Often they can make their own connections on their own when you listen that way. And partner with them to see, how do you want your kid to understand it? And you only start with what they already know. How can we help them understand what happened? Making sure they know it's not their fault. We will not burden them with these existential bigger fears, as this mom had. When she tells her she's going to work, she needs to tell her, and I come back because that's what you plan to do. So I hope that's a helpful way to distinguish that. I'm not saying we burden children with details, but I am saying we help them not be burdened with these secrets on their own. We partner with parents so that they can explain these things to them. The next one is reconnecting to affect. Selma Fiber used to say that connecting emotions to experience is one way to interrupt the intergenerational transmission of trauma, is connecting emotions to experiences we had as we were parented, that helps us parent differently. I want to lift up my grandmother's hands from Resmaa Menakem, where I learned a lot about trauma in the body and how essential it is for us to reconnect to affect. Trauma teaches us to disconnect by virtue of what trauma does. It teaches us to flee from our body, flee from our experience, because we're so overwhelmed by it. We need to do the antidote of that. We need to do the opposite of that. learning to soothe and resource ourselves, learning to pause. That's how I started the talk today. Notice where you're at. Where are you in your heart? Where are you in your gut? Put one hand in your heart, one hand in your gut. Take a breath. Where are you? Where's this sitting with you? Where are you tense? Take a pause and notice. Discern those sensations, those vibrations, those emotions in your body. See if we can grow in our capacity to accept and tolerate that discomfort. So many of the dysfunctional coping strategies, like, going to substances or freezing, are ways that we disconnect, that we try to numb, right, from our experience. If we can grow our tolerance to just accept emotions as they are, knowing that they will pass, growing our buffer, right, to be able to connect with parents who are in pain and be able to tolerate that discomfort, knowing it will pass, be with them in it, and don't let that get stuck in you either. You connecting with people because they can tell when you're just thinking, oh, I'm just going to do this strategy right now. They can tell what they need is your humanity and be informed by all the strategies. And we're also not absorbing the pain that we're witnessing and letting it sit in us. We need to grow in our capacity to metabolize, let it flow. We're metabolizers of pain. You connect, notice how it's impacting you, let it flow. Do that with clients. When clients are overwhelmed, flooding, zoning out, dissociating, see if you can first respect their defense. It's there for a reason. And I'm not saying we need to rid of defenses, but see if you can, in your relationship with them, grow a little bit their capacity to just be with what is. Tolerate it and let it flow. Do something to let it flow. Move your body. Some people said dance, music, flow, let it flow. If you haven't read this book, I strongly encourage it. He goes through specific exercises you can do. You can apply it with your teams. The next one is restoring safety in relationship. Nothing happens outside of relationships. All wounding, all healing. And trauma emerges in relationships. People will reenact with you the pain that they're holding by either pushing you away or by doing both, needing you desperately, but then pushing you away, and maybe showing you their pain by not showing up for sessions, or even not valuing the service or you as a person, or showing anger. All of these things are manifestations of trauma in relationships. The relationship in itself is the strategy. And so you're using that relationship to create a new working template. A working template is Bowlby's language of thinking of in early childhood. You have a conclusion of what you can expect relationships to be like and what that means about who you are as a person. You are a new relationship, and you are building, and through that relationship that you're building, you're establishing perhaps a new dance where they can feel safe, seen, held, understood, where you can co-regulate and where you can help them grow in their capacity to co-regulate with their young children. You are growing their capacity to restore safety in their relationship with their child. There's a parallel process here. If we want children to experience this in their relationship with their caregivers need us. They need to experience that with us. So as we are nurtured, we are then enabled to nurture, as Jerry Paul would say. It likes to go backwards. The last one I want to think about with you is system healing. Again, so much of the wounding that happens in families are failures of systems, or more of this collective trauma and injustice. the system in itself, by definition, will have like a life of its own, and trauma impacts systems as an entity. We are part of systems, and therefore trauma will have an impact on us and our system. And so I encourage you to be thinking about critically, to thinking critically about what trauma-informed systems is, which has become a more prevalent used word. There's been there's a lot of advantages to this wave of trauma-informed systems, but sometimes sometimes it becomes a training that you go and you check a box. Really make it part of your practice, embed it, to be looking critically at everything that we do for immigrant families and ourselves. How does it match with our mission, our vision, and what we know helps and heals people and communities? Are we doing all of these things of being a trauma-informed system? Are we really centering and lifting up the immigrant community, Black and Brown community, and those voices that are unheard? So as I mentioned, systems have a life of their own. If you do nothing to your system, and there's a lot of subsystems that we're part of, holding in mind those systems, if you do nothing to it and you're exposed to trauma, you will by definition become a trauma reactive system. And many of the systems we engage with, sadly, are. They're fragmented, overwhelmed, they're driven by fear, they're reactive, rigid, numb, to no fault of their own. That's the definition of trauma. If you do nothing to buffer it, if you don't counter it actively, intentionally, in a continuous way, then you will, by definition, become reactive at times. Moving towards on this range to a trauma-informed system, which is, as I mentioned, so much of San Francisco Unified and Oakland Unified Schools and many other systems have been moving toward at least having some training on trauma and its impact on people, and some recognition that we don't want to be trauma-inducing systems. I encourage us today to move further, to really be safe, supportive, healing, attuned systems. If the system in itself has these qualities, if it's truly collaborative, it's centered on relationships, if it's reflective, those are the antidotes of trauma. If we are that in the system, it's creating a trauma-reducing environment for us and all of the people that we interface with and the families and communities we work with. If you're looking at this and thinking, well, where am I and where's my team and all the teams I've been a part of? These aren't distinct categories. It's fluid, just like people are. You might have your own history of trauma, and on a good day, you are able to manage those triggers. But then COVID hit, or then an anniversary hit, and you are triggered and you might become reactive. Just like clients become reactive, systems can do that as well. So you might be in a system where most of the time we all try to be trauma-informed by the fact that you even are making the time today to do this talk. I already assume that you've had a lot of training and information and intention on being trauma-informed. We need to push to continue growing and be healing, be equitable, be inclusive, use our voices to advocate for families, because so much of the harm that they experience is injustice and policies that are not set up to help them. So make an institutional commitment to recruit, to really walk the talk, recruit staff and volunteers who represent the community. The Indigenous community, sadly, there's not a lot of representation in Indigenous languages from Central America and Southern Mexico, that we see prevalent communities here, and yet very little staff that represent it. What's already working for the community? Can we lift up volunteers? Can we grow the capacity within the community already and truly support our people and support people that are committed to this work and represent the communities that we are targeting? Do not use children as translators. Man, this happened to me as a teenager with my own parents, and in many systems, health system, school system. It's so problematic. In many ways, it disrupts the family dynamics of power and control. It places an unfair burden on children. Already we see this gap in between generations because of culture, because of language. Many children who pick up English much faster than their parents, they don't want to talk in Spanish to their parents. There's already so much gap between them. Don't further that by using children in these positions. We as systems need to be equipped, and parents deserve translators at IEP meetings, health meetings, and we need to partner with them to be able to advocate and ask for that. I hope we're doing okay with time. I want to spend just a few more minutes thinking about sustainability. I've been threading it throughout, but we need you. It's been a really uniquely tough time since COVID and beyond. COVID exposed and amplified the injustices that were already there. Families are hurting, schools are hurting, many systems are understaffed. We need you. This is the community, the people that showed up here. These are the colleagues who are fighting for immigrants and for healing in these communities. How do we sustain each other? How do we establish a community of caring? To make this work possible, we need to aim for an integrated sense of self. Is that flow, a regulated nervous system, a present internal flow. I encourage you to resource on vicarious trauma, The Age of Overwhelm, and other books that she's written, Laura Van Dernipsky. What sustains you? What sustains you? What brought you here? What keeps you here? Managing your exposure levels. I know people are overworked because we're understaffed. You might be doing 2 or 3 jobs in one. For whatever you're doing in the moment, stay present in the moment. Try to stay connected in the moment. Don't accumulate more than you are metabolizing. So if you're accumulating more, the more trauma you're being exposed to, the more you need to increase your metabolization, how you metabolize it actively and in regular practice, not just when you're overwhelmed or can't get out of bed. We need to do it together as a community and in a regular, routine way, in small ways like stretching before meetings, checking in with each other, creating an organizational culture of caring, sustaining our attention on gratitude and hope changes our brain wiring. I talked about how the brain is shaped by experience. That exponentially happens in the first 5 years of life, but our brains don't stop growing and changing. We are constantly to the day we die trying to make new connections. Our brain is desperate, and our body and our soul is desperately trying to heal. We can rewire our brain by what we're training our brain to do. If we train our brain to observe the present moment, mindfulness has a robust body of literature supporting its effectiveness, especially with trauma. Can we grow in our capacity to be present without judgment, growing the good? There's a lot new research that's not new at all. People have known this forever. Our abuelitas have known it forever, but now we have research to back it up. Gratitude, hope, sense of belonging, many of the things you listed on the chat. You're right, that's where it's at. We need to grow that, and not just on the people we work with. Again, it's not us and them. We're in this together. If you want to stay in this work, you need to know yourself, know your vulnerabilities, know your strengths, and know what you need to do to keep growing your buffer. I want to share a song with you. I listen to it often. It speaks to me, and it's in Spanish. Those of you that don't speak Spanish, there are subtitles in English on the song. And I'm just gonna invite you to enjoy, listen, pay attention to what comes up for you. And then we'll have some time to debrief in small groups, hopefully, if we have time and together.
es la forma correcta de andar y de dirigirme a quien tuve delante. De grande me costó a tropiezos poder darme cuenta que había que volver a ser niña y desenseñarme cómo callar, cómo dejar atrás lo que te pega. Vengo a ofrecerme hoy. Remamos sabiendo cuál es el precio, con los puños apretados, sin pensar en detenernos. Remamos con la cara contra el viento, con la valentía delante, con un pueblo entre los dedos. Remamos con un nudo aquí en el pecho, soñando que al otro lado se avecina otro comienzo. Y me quedé bajo la lluvia aunque la voz se canse. Total es lo único que queda que no se ha quebrado. Donde hay dolor y falta luz, que mi garganta cante. Que en la canción agarren fuerza mis pies anclados. Cómo callar, cómo dejar atrás lo que te pega. Vengo a ofrecerme hoy. Remamos sabiendo cuál es el precio, con los puños apretados, sin pensar en detenernos. Remamos con la cara contra el viento, con la valentía delante, con un pueblo entre los dedos. Remamos con un nudo aquí en el pecho, soñando que al otro lado se avecina otro comienzo. Cómo callar, cómo dejar atrás lo que te pega. Vengo a ofrecerme hoy. Remamos.
And minutes. What would be the best way to debrief? Take a breath. Hopefully you've been breathing throughout. Take an intentional breath. Thank you for hanging there with me. I'm open to like a 5-minute breakout room if you think that might be helpful. Sometimes it's nicer to debrief in smaller groups, and or we can be with each other in a bigger community and hear from a couple of people. Use the chat. Anyone have a strong preference? Aura, do you have a sense, or I
It's
see?
looking like folks are saying bigger group.
Okay, together, great.
The timing. Mhm.
Yeah, I apologize that there wasn't a lot of time for breakout rooms, but I hope you have we'll have a few minutes now, and I hope you have other spaces as well where you can see how this sits, breathe through it, keep reflecting on it, keep talking to your colleagues about it. We're not alone in this work. We can't do this alone. I'm going to just pause and allow for you to have some space. So I'm going to pay attention to the chat, and if people want to unmute and add a comment, a takeaway, a reaction, a feeling, a thought, a question.
I'd like to say something if it's possible.
It is. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ada Robinson and I work at Children's Hospital in Oakland. And I just want to thank you for the presentation. It's very heartfelt and emotional. I realize that probably many of us on this Zoom take on a lot of responsibility, take on a lot of weight, other stories, others' experiences. And I want to thank you for bringing a moment of understanding to ourselves, compassion for ourselves, a moment of peace, and to say it's okay not to carry it all. It's okay to take care of ourselves. So thank you very, very much. Really, truly appreciate it.
Thank you for that. I appreciate all of you too and what you do, and you're speaking to something very real. This might be the hardest part of this work. How do we stay balanced and present and sustain it, stay connected, and continue to be able to feel, but not let it overwhelm us or break us. Would anyone else like to say another comment?
Okay. I'm Orlando Johnson. I'm a member of Oakland Community Action Network, and I was part of the Oakland Municipal City ID card that we created with the immigrant community. And I believe this PowerPoint is very heartfelt because I also work with the moms community, and the language barrier at Sandy Ebonics is a very hard word to translate when we're trying to get this message across. And I believe the way you shared it, if it could share across different languages, not just English or Spanish, but all other cultures, I believe this need to be felt. And we are immigrants and we are never alone. And because they say we immigrants, it don't mean we helpless or don't have no resources or we the end of the barrel. We're someone, family members, someone's mothers, fathers, and brothers we love. And this brought tears to my eyes. I just want to say thank you for this presentation.
I feel you. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for that comment. Yeah, there's often invisibility in certain immigrant communities. And it's so important to lift up all of them because anti-Blackness is still like another layer of more marginalization for many Black immigrants. We have immigrants from all over the world, and that needs to be lifted up in these conversations as well.
Vilma, I just want to say I appreciate you and this presentation that you honored us with. You bring this topic. Every time I have heard you speak, it's done with such grace and so much knowledge, but you're making it so much more attainable and easy to grasp and understand such complicated. Well, it doesn't have to be complex, but it is when you're dealing with children and families, I think. But you present it in such a way that is so heartfelt, and I really like the piece about having not only compassion for our families, but for ourselves. I think sometimes we get feedback, I get feedback within my program that, you know, having self-care be a focus is how did she put it? Can be something that is selfish and that is almost saying that it was not okay to do that, to have that focus. And so I really appreciated you reiterating that today. Thank you.
Thank you. I think with any profession, you wouldn't go without your preparation, your tool. If you were going to, if you're a mechanic and you're going to go fix a car, you wouldn't come without the tools you use to do that. And if there's any tools that would equip us for this type of work, it is knowing ourselves well and knowing what to do with the emotional content that comes up from the work. So working intentionally to make just like you would fine tune any skills for any other profession, if you're going to work in matters of the heart, you have to put in the time, commitment, and effort, and organizations need to validate that time for people to really spend time growing their capacity to withstand accompanying pain. And it's not a responsibility of each person on their own, because sometimes it feels like organizations are like, you need to take care of yourself. Like there's something, you need to take care of that, come back, take a day off, come back. This is community work. This is community healing. This is community care. We, especially when a lot of what we are trying to cope with there is derived from the type of work we do, we need to lean on each other and be able to say, and certainly if you need time off, take it. And it's not our exclusively our own responsibility to care for ourselves. We need to care for each other. There's so much more power in that. And be able to notice when a colleague, is eating through lunch in front of the computer and say, let's go for a walk if you're up for it. Or I notice you're a little more down or more anxious. I'm here for it. Showing up for each other is the only way we're going to make through this type of work in a sustainable way. Naila?
Hi, I'm Nilay, and I just want to share my experience, and I'm being really vulnerable here. You sent a video before to watch before the presentation, and I had a strong reaction to video. Even though I really like her work, I was, being immigrant and being in the community mental health field, and especially in San Francisco, everyone being culturally sensitive. They don't realize they make so much generalization. And I'm like, why African American talking about intergenerational trauma when the topic was immigrant families? I just thought, oh, this must be a white person making generalization. I could see my reaction. And usually I don't move with my first reaction. I try to watch. I said, no, I'm going to show up. And I did came, and I did really enjoy, but definitely watching that video triggered me, because I'm like, here again, my experience as an immigrant family is dismissed by another minority's experience. I would prefer, as an immigrant family talking about trauma.
I see. I first want to thank you for your courage and honesty and vulnerability in how you experienced that video. I watched it and had a different reaction. It motivated me to think a lot about different concepts of collective trauma, which I found relevant to our work. And you bring a really good point that maybe didn't resonate as much into the immigrant experience. I sadly see that the oppressive nature of kind of white supremacy often kind of puts marginalized communities in a fight with each other for the crumbs that are left after the 1% is done with it. And so I see us all as connected and together in this fight for justice and equality. And I found that the things she said were really relevant. And I appreciate your experience, which maybe felt like it dismissed the immigrant experience or your experience. I really appreciate you showed up, and I'm glad you did. But it's not obviously my intent to cause a trigger. And you were right. You found a white immigrant speaking about trauma. And I have also multiple identities in which I am an asylum seeker. I did have to learn English. as a teenager, and I've experienced tremendous privilege because of the color of my skin. And my immigration experience is different than the communities that walked 1,500 miles to get here. So we all have the richness of all the multiple identities that we carry. I value yours, and I'm very glad you came here today and that you're doing this work. And it looks like we're out of time. I am sorry to the two other people that wanted to speak. I want to make sure people are moving on to the next thing they have to do on time, and for me not to keep you. But I really appreciate all of your work and what you bring to this community. And until next time. Bye. Thank you.
Vilma, for a wonderful presentation. We just want to thank you and acknowledge you for the knowledge and sharing of experiences and creating this moment and space for our audience.